Comic-Con went online, live theater and concerts have ceased, TV and movie productions were halted. But like life in Jurassic Park, artists, performers, and producers have found a way. A special look at how arts and culture are faring across San Diego in this year of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Mark Sauer, and the KPBS Roundtable starts now.
Now on The Finest, we examine an icon. Our Lady of Guadalupe has been a powerful symbol for 500 years, and artists have reimagined her as a source of resilience and pride. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to our special Holiday Week edition of the Roundtable. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me on this remote broadcast today are KPBS Arts and Culture reporter Beth Accomando, Julia Dixon-Evans, the editor and producer of the KPBS Arts Calendar, and Tim Piles, DJ at 91X and host of the local music show Loudspeaker. The COVID-19 pandemic has been the major disruptor of our time. It's all-encompassing, taking 250,000 American lives and changing the fundamentals of our society. And that includes places we go for an escape. Movie theaters are closed. Big events that people mark on their calendars have vanished. So this week, we're dedicating our show to arts and culture, how it changed in 2020, and what it might look like if and when the virus subsides. Our first guest is Beth Accomando, arts and culture reporter for KPBS. Beth, welcome back to the Roundtable.
Thanks.
Well, let's start with San Diego's biggest event. For the first time in its history, Comic-Con was canceled. What's the outlook for Comic-Con returning in 2021?
Well, they're a very cautious organization, so they have not made any decisions at this point about whether they plan to do an in-person event or continue doing something online. But they have the Comic-Con Museum, which is continuing to do online programming this whole time. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
And like so many events this year, the Pop Culture Showcase went virtual with a robust slate of online content. Now that some time has passed, are organizers pleased with how that went? And could some of that format be part of the future Comic-Cons if things do get back to normal?
Yeah, I think everyone was pretty pleased with what happened. I got to see more panels than I have ever seen before because once they went online, they stayed there for a while and you were able to catch up with them like in the evening. And I think everyone was really happy with it. And the great thing is that smaller panels really had the ability to reach more people because people weren't choosing between waiting in line all day for Hall H and checking in on a small comics panel or something. And I think as they move forward, they will probably try to incorporate online panels in some way, shape, or form, but that's still yet to be determined.
So maybe some sort of a new amalgam on all that.
Yeah, I think so. It was very successful, and it was really enjoyable to check out some of these panels on topics that, you know, I would never have had time to go and sit in and wait in line for them and fit as many as I did in.
Now, a big part of your coverage for KPBS is film, and we should remind our audience of your Cinema Junkie podcast. San Diego is a healthy film scene with a variety of festivals. How did those change during this year?
Wow, this was a crazy year because the San Diego Latino Film Festival had to cancel the day of its opening night because that was the day that the governor declared that, you know, in-person meetings couldn't happen. So they were the first to have to juggle all that in a very short span of time to try and figure out what to do. I think all the festivals have really adapted well. I'd like to highlight, too, I think that the Italian Film Festival did a fabulous job of creating something that was ongoing through the year where they would screen a film during the week and then do a Zoom discussion on the Sunday after. And because it was a Zoom event, they could have filmmakers from Italy appear and talk to their attendees. And it was a really great way to transition from that in-person event to something online. And then I have to give some props to the Asian Film Festival for some of the most innovative programming because they did their Mystery Kung Fu Theater as a live Twitch event. And they also created some pop-up drive-in events. And they did some crazy stuff with a projector running 16 millimeter film on Twitch while, you know, people got to choose which film ran. I mean, they just did some really fun, clever stuff that engaged the audience in different ways.
So necessity is the mother of invention after all. Now, aside from logistics and moving online and moving content online, there's a financial toll. Are these organizations really hurting by not hosting big events?
Yeah, I mean, they're hurting by not hosting the events they're used to because, people are used to paying money to get a pass to go see all these films. Now things are online. It feels different. Is it as exclusive? Is it as interactive? Is it as personal? These festivals are the main way that a lot of these organizations get their money. And so this has been a huge impact on them. And they're competing now with everything. I mean, it's not just, are you going to go to the San Diego Latino Film Festival, but are you going to go to the Latino Festival here in San Diego? Or are you going to attend maybe Tribeca is doing something online or, something in LA or San Francisco. So you're competing with a far broader range of, events because people can access so much online from anywhere.
And Hollywood isn't immune, of course, to COVID-19. Major movie theater chains, smaller independents, have been closed most of the year. Some are talking about not coming back, and new releases have slowed down considerably. Is Hollywood in trouble as this drags on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated thing because not only are they in trouble if the theater chains don't open, but they're in trouble because they're going to run out of product if they can't start production up again. So running out of content is going to be an issue for them. And, it's just difficult. They don't want to release some of their big, expensive films online or streaming because they may not be able to make the money back. And also people feel like those are the kind of films you want to see on a big screen. And if they release them now, if theaters open up 6 months or something, people may not be willing to spend money a second time to see it on a big screen. So it's a lot of gambling and trying to figure out what is going to be the best way for us to showcase our product and what's the best way for us to make the money back and what's the best way to reach an audience and keep them satisfied so that when theaters do open, they're going to be willing to come back.
And right, we've been talking about this shift and how people are consuming content and pandemic, it's accelerating the push to digital and streaming platform. Big year for Netflix and others, after all. Is that the silver lining in all this?
Well, the interesting thing is that because so much stuff is going streaming, it does allow for smaller films to really reach an audience because people are looking for entertainment and they're looking for new stuff and they're looking for new content. Hollywood's had a couple, had some successes. The Trolls World Tour was one of the first ones to go streaming online and it raked in a ton of money. But Mulan was less successful in that streaming format. It's kind of crazy out there and a bit chaotic. But I think people are definitely turning to streaming platforms and becoming more accustomed to seeing films there. So people who might have never used a streaming platform may have tested it out during the pandemic and may feel comfortable with it and may want to stay with that as opposed to going out to a cinema.
And finally, what's your takeaway in talking with artists and creators this year? What kind of toll has the pandemic taken on them mentally? It's taken toll on all of us, of course. And has that affected or influenced their art?
Oh, it definitely has influenced their art. I mean, I think the thing that is really inspirational from all of this is how artists have adapted. And some of the creativity that has come out of this is just amazing. Some of the Without Walls events that the La Jolla Playhouse has done have been phenomenal. And, I've done some stories on some national shows, like there's one Mythic Quest that did a fabulous pandemic episode where everybody shot in their own homes and they combined it all in this kind of, Zoom environment. There is also Shudder has done a couple of interesting films too. One was called Host, and it's all done within the confines of a 40-minute Zoom event, and it's a supernatural thriller. But, artists are really coming up with clever ways to deal with the limitations. And I think on a certain level, limitations and restrictions inspire artists and really get them to dig deep to find ways to do what they want to do without the tools and things that they're used to using.
Well, we'll see what 2021 brings because it's been a rough year all the way around, even with some silver linings along the way. I've been speaking with Beth Accomando, arts and culture reporter for KPBS and the host of the Cinema Junkie podcast. Thanks a lot, Beth.
Thank you.
The cancellation of big events like Comic-Con rightfully drew headlines this year. But in the art galleries, dance studios, and museums across San Diego County, the losses are staggering. Nearly $100 million in lost revenue, according to one recent study. Artists have found workarounds and new ways to showcase their talent, but it's tough to replace that in-person creative exchange that enriches our community. Joining us to talk about COVID-19's effect on creative and performing arts is Julia Dixon Evans, editor and producer of the KPBS Arts Calendar. Hi, Julia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, you recently reported on the details about this local study in the arts community and the business impact of the pandemic. What stands out to you from this report?
Yeah, so this study, it's from the Nonprofit Institute and University of San Diego and San Diego's Commission for Arts and Culture. For me, it's just how widespread the impact is. We're seeing like 95% of organizations reporting a loss of revenue. Seeing the data like that really spotlights just how impossible and broad this is, and that bigger nonprofits like these major institutions, they're struggling as much as the smaller ones. In fact, the larger nonprofits are laying off or furloughing workers at a slightly higher rate even.
Yeah, just no way to prepare for this. Nobody'd seen anything like it before.
Right. It's unprecedented in many ways.
Now, some art lends itself to going virtual. Other disciplines really need to be seen in person. Which disciplines or organizations have been able to make that transition?
So one of the authors of the study had said that smaller organizations had an easier time transitioning, possibly with less overhead going on. But for the most part, it's the type of programming that makes the difference. So workshops and classes or conferences were more likely to transition online, less likely to be canceled than, say, performances or visual art exhibitions. And I think part of that might have something to do with how we had this big movement as a society for learning new skills or finding something to do with your time at the start of the pandemic.
On the other hand, which disciplines have a harder time taking their work online?
Yeah, so performing arts in general have struggled with that for sure. And we saw a lot of theater companies getting Zoom plays out right away and dance companies doing dance films. But even if they had a platform or a way of reaching their audiences, the performers struggled to get together safely, particularly with choirs where singing is so much more dangerous and it's pretty impossible to sing together on Zoom. And then you have to question how people will tune in if this virtual platform will meet their needs as a consumer and what they're willing to pay for it. Moxie Theater had told me that their audience, generally the virtual audience, is about a quarter of what it used to be, and that because it's on a screen and the people are home, they're more likely to only want to pay about the same as a movie ticket versus a theater ticket.
Right, the revenue has really dried up for a lot of these folks, and the pandemic has upended that for many, driving them out of their jobs. How is that particularly true for women in the arts?
Yeah, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics has said that women are leaving the general workforce at about 4 times the rate of men, and partly because of juggling responsibilities of distance learning if they're parents. The issue is pretty complex overall, but Jennifer Eve Thorne of Moxie Theater told me that she's seeing that women in the arts industry may actually be worse off because they were already likely underpaid and their career in that industry already was likely struggling.
And there's a ripple effect in the economy. These artistic organizations are often nonprofits that rely on donations, and those who can still give might be more compelled to give to a food bank or other charities since there's so much need out there. How has the pandemic created almost a competition for philanthropy?
Yeah, they're seeing about 50% of donors changing their giving patterns. So they're giving to those places, like you said, with more immediate needs. And what this means for nonprofits is places are having to work harder to find foundations or funds that support them, or find ways to collaborate on or work on projects that are more social justice minded and that can get them in that space too.
And let's take a moment to talk about the mental toll of the pandemic and how that's affected artists and their work. How are these stressful times influencing the content that these artists are creating? I can imagine post-pandemic we may see plays and all sorts of writing about the pandemic and living through it and the psychological toll.
Right. And I think a lot of artists ran with the free time or the lack of distractions, but I've talked to so many artists who said at first they couldn't make art at all. And in some cases that stuck around. So many people have said this, that the death of George Floyd and the racial justice protests really pushed them into action. So a lot of the art that we're seeing made has had an element of social justice in nature. But for others, like performing artists, such as dancers in particular, I think there's a real athletic element at play. So like the feel of the right kind of floor under your feet, or the act of performing on stage next to someone else. These artists were really missing that, and virtual versions just don't really cut it.
And do you have a particular story or piece of art that left a real impression on you during this particular time?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is this program called Move American by a local dance collective called Disco Riot. It was a series of short dance films all centered around these different American narratives on voting. It really dug into like how stories are told and who gets to decide which stories are shared on our stages. And I just have really gotten into the dance film genre lately. It's been around a while, but I feel like it had a bit of a revolution since the performance halls are closed.
And the holidays are certainly an artistic time of year. The Old Globe isn't staging its traditional production of The Grinch, but it's being reproduced for radio. How is KPBS involved in that project?
Yeah, so KPBS is airing this sort of old-timey radio play format of Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Many of the same actors from previous productions are involved, and it's kind of this gather around the radio and listen to the classic story feel, but it's really accessible, so it really takes this tradition. I think a lot of the art around the holidays are built on traditions like the Nutcracker and the Grinch, but it really brings that tradition into an accessible format.
I'll look forward to getting my grandchildren collected around us, and we'll listen to that. That should be a lot of fun. I've been speaking with Julia Dixon Evans, editor and producer of the KPBS Arts Calendar. Thanks, Julia.
Thanks so much, Mark. I appreciate it. Now on The Finest. In San Diego and beyond, Our Lady of Guadalupe has morphed in meaning and form over the past 500 years.
She can be a source of comfort. She can be a source of pain. Her power comes because she has all of these different facets to her.
Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Many of us have turned to music to get us through this stressful year, and that's a major chunk of our local art scene that's especially hurting. Concerts might be among the last big events to make a comeback, just due to the nature of hundreds, if not thousands of people crammed into a small space. For this special show, we invited Tim Piles, DJ at 91X and host of the local music show Loudspeaker, to join us. Tim, welcome to the Roundtable.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first off, Loudspeaker recently hit a milestone, 30 years of showcasing local music on 91X. Why do you think it's endured so long?
Well, luckily, it's the people behind the radio station, for one, that have supported local music. You know, obviously, so many ownership changes has changed the landscape of radio just in the last year here in San Diego. But thank goodness they recognized it all those years ago. Marco Collins, who's kind of a legend in alternative radio, started the program. And, you know, there's been a couple things that have happened that have bumped up its popularity. You know, I really have to thank 94.9 coming into our scene and changing, you know, they put the local show on at a much earlier time, which then reflected what 91X did. So then a Loudspeaker was put on at a much more valuable time for listeners and to catch listeners to turn local bands on. So I'm blessed, you know, especially right now with what's going on. It's shocking to see all these people around the country losing their job in radio. And luckily 91X is owned by a true independent company and not being affected by a lot of this.
And COVID-19 has thrown the local music scene for a loop. What do you think's been the biggest challenge for artists during this time? Is it the lack of venues or perhaps something else?
Well, you know, definitely no shows. Some of the restaurant gigs, you know, there's kind of different levels of local musicians. You know, you might have a local musician that has kind of this band persona and project that performs at the Casbah or the Belly Up, but they also make their living by working at a vineyard or a restaurant and performing while people are eating their meals. So I think on some level, some of that music has come back in an outdoor environment. But, you know, I mean, I guess thank goodness for loans or unemployment. I mean, honestly, I don't know how a lot of these people are surviving. I'm in an okay situation, but, you know, I was doing stuff for the Casbah. That is gone. The TV show San Diego that I was a part of has wrapped up, you know, during COVID, and I was hosting events in town, and, you know, a good chunk of my life has kind of been sucked away, and I'm not sure how to transition. Right now I'm okay. So I'm planning on waiting it out. But it's a day or night experience for a guy that spent 4 or 5 nights a week going to see bands locally and touring bands and bands that tour, that same experience. It was all gone overnight. So, the streaming thing is kind of cool, but it's not nearly as exciting as being inside the Casbah.
Right. Certainly appreciate that. Well, when it comes to venues, they've been silent since March. What are you hearing about their survival as we approach nearly 1 year without events?
Yeah, I got to figure House of Blues is okay and they can sit something like this out. But, Belly Up and Casbah and Brick by Brick, some of my favorite venues, they're locally owned. And for them to survive this is going to be miraculous. I mean, it seems like Casbah and the Belly Up are going to be okay. But every time, I wake up and get on social media or look at any news stories, there's places closing. It's been, some bars and restaurants. I mean, Bar Pink, that's a big hit. They did a lot to support local music. And so it's really sad to see that happen and lose that.
Let's also get your take on the music industry as a whole. Live Nation, the major concert promoter in the U.S., said its revenue was down 95% this summer. Major festivals like Coachella were canceled. How does that impact the health of the industry overall?
Well, I'm sure Live Nation is really doing okay, but I'm more concerned about the people that are the infrastructure to making that happen. There's a lot of people that count on Coachella and the Stagecoach Festival to put themselves to work here in Southern California for 3-4 months, and it's those people that are hurting the most. I mean, as we all know, Live Nation is probably doing just fine. I'm not worried about them, but yeah, anything below that, there's some organizations out there. I believe NITO is one and NEVA is the other, and they're kind of related to independent venues, and then the people that are like the riggers and the ones that are setting up all these shows that are all out of work.
And we've asked the panel this week about how the pandemic is influencing the arts when it comes to content. Are you hearing the influences in music when it comes to songwriting or other ways bands express themselves? And maybe it's a little soon for that because we're still in lockdown, as it were.
Well, Tori Rose, she's in this great project called Tori Rose and the Hot Mess, and her project released a great cover of one of my favorite bands and their song Ghost Town, the band being the Specials. And that's very apropos because San Diego, as much of the country, is a ghost town. There are a lot of people doing some cool, fun streaming things, trying maybe to get, donations and however somebody might access that through a Patreon or Venmo. I've been fascinated by what some people are doing to transition. There was this local woman, Victoria Robertson, that was performing arias on her North Park stoop every Sunday for like 4 months. I don't think she's doing it anymore, but yeah, I'm not really a fan of the idea of the drive-in concerts, but it's something. And if you're, really jonesing to go to a concert and get that experience again, there's something happening. So there's something out there if you want to put yourself out there. I personally haven't even gone to one yet.
Well, you mentioned streaming. Do you know if bands are having any luck on YouTube or other places online?
I'm seeing more projects doing, bigger bands. I know the Gorillaz have something planned, which is kind of a worldwide event. But locally, I want to say they are, Tori Rose is doing even like a silly costume karaoke thing every week. And it's ways for these people to try to find a way to connect with their fans and hopefully stay valid, stay on top of mind, and have some kind of creative outlet. At least with COVID happening, there are a lot of tools for you to do something, and it might be a great time to create, even though it's a hard time probably to find motivation.
And of course, we're all hopeful that things are going to return to normal in the months ahead. The sooner couldn't get here soon enough for all of us, especially as the vaccines are rolled out. And when that happens and we get the all clear for concerts again, what's the first act you want to see live?
Well, I was thinking long and hard about that one, and I'm just gonna have to say to keep it local, because that's the flavor of what we're doing. And I love so many great local bands, but you know what? The band that I love the most and is tattooed on my arm is Rocket from the Crypt. And those shows are incendiary and and just in your face, and one of the best rock and roll bands I've ever experienced in my life. And they're from our backyard in San Diego.
That's the best thing, right? Now, before we go, remind us about Loudspeaker and how people can listen.
So yeah, I'm really blessed to be doing the show. I was there in the early 2000s. I left to 94.9 for about 10 years, and I've been back at 91X, just celebrating a 6-year anniversary this month. The show is every Sunday night, 7 to 10 p.m. You can tune in old-fashioned style on the radio, 91.1 FM. It's a border blaster. We transmit out of a hill in Mexico, so it can be heard far and wide. You can also stream it at 91x.com. And yes, ask your smart speaker to play 91X.
Dave Alvin and Border Radio. I'm reminded of that song as you explain all of that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I can remember being a young person hearing 91X as far as Santa Barbara, and I've even heard myself on the radio through the wonder of technology, hearing myself on 91X when I was up in Hollywood, up in the Hollywood Hills. So it is a powerful signal and hugely influential since 1983. It's crazy.
Listening to the Border Radio. I've been speaking with Tim Piles, host of Loudspeaker on 91X. Thanks a lot, Tim.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been a great honor. I love KPBS.
That wraps up this holiday weekend special of the Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Beth Accomando and Julia Dixon Evans of KPBS, and Tim Piles, host of the local music show Loudspeaker on 91X. A reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for listening, and join us again next week on the Roundtable.
Now on The Finest, we examine an icon. Our Lady of Guadalupe has been a powerful symbol for 500 years, and artists have reimagined her as a source of resilience and pride. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.